sightings, and there were a number of explanations. And then I'll have sort of a Paul Harvey kind of a moment here, and I'll show you one final document that if I don't run out of time and if the hook doesn't come out and yank me off here, we can get to. Okay, so there's Maryland. We go from Maryland to DC, comic strip. Now, prior to a few weeks ago, I always thought that if UFOs were a security problem, the Air Force would be greatly interested. Now, this DC strip, I saw something strange last night. I saw something moving across the sky. Did it threaten your security? Then who cares? No, then who cares? That's been the attitude of not only the government for all these years, but the scientific community in this country. Does it threaten our security? Does it seem to involve intelligent life, interacting with humans? Do we have pieces of it? Are they coming right down here? And if they can say no, then who cares about this stuff? Who cares about this data? It's just thrown out. Well, we have the 52 cases here, which seemingly did affect national security. A couple of years ago, we had something hovering over a terminal at O'Hare Airport. Back in 2008, at Stephenville, Texas, we had a series of events where UFOs were picked up on radar. We've got the radar traces. The objects were operating right next to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, along a path that was heavily traveled by commercial airliners, and approached airspace where President Bush had his, at that time, the Western White House. It seemed to directly affect the security of the United States. Then, as I'm sure a lot of you folks are aware of, a couple weeks ago there was a press conference, National Press Club. A fellow named Robert Hastings convened a panel of gentlemen who had served at Strategic Air Command bases back in the 60s. They talked about UFOs hovering over the bases and directly interfering with the launch codes of the missiles. In some cases, throwing the missiles offline. This happened in '67. And this was a very serious press conference with people who had very grave meanings when they were talking. They were very serious people. They ran up there in a joking, frivolous manner, these ex-Air Force folks, to talk about what happened back then. If that doesn't directly influence the security of the country, then I don't know what does. Do they have to drop bombs or something? But there was no response, and will be no response from the government. So I throw up my hands. I do not know. Apparently, things can affect or seem to affect the security of the United States, and still no one takes notice. So it just goes back to what I think this field should be doing, and this is a little bit of my opinion here. I'm on a soapbox, but that's what I think these sightings like Washington National sort of push you up into, that if the government isn't going to come forth with what it knows, and it may know nothing, the hell with them. We don't need them. And the scientific community can handle UFO cases, the civilian scientific community. So our job as UFO people, as UFO investigators, as UFO researchers, is to see that not only are good cases publicized, but that these good cases are analyzed by investigators and scientists to the greatest extent we can. And if we can get the scientific community, the civilian scientific community involved in these sightings, then we might actually make some progress. But I'm afraid to say that after all these decades of looking at UFOs and investigating them, 60 plus years, we haven't made a whole lot of progress. And the security thing seems to be out, like I said, that we can no longer rely upon that to help us with our struggles to investigate vis-a-vis the government. Okay, what are we talking about here? Here's a rather dim map, which is not quite so dark, but anyhow, it's a map of Northern Virginia and Washington. Here's National Airport. Right across from National Airport is Bowling Air Force Base. It's still there today. They usually use Bowling now for helicopters, and even back then they didn't have fixed wing aircraft taking off or landing from Bowling. And over here to the east, by a number of miles, 10 miles or so, is Andrews Air Force Base, where Air Force One is based. So that's just off the screen of the map, the border of the map. And so here's National Airport, and this area right here now is where Crystal City is. I'll leave this up for a little bit. When we, again, it takes a lot to set the table here for the 52 sightings. And we have, like I said, actually 3 venues here: Bowling Air Force Base, which played a little role, Andrews Air Force Base, which played a pretty big role, and then, of course, National Airport. National Airport at that time, and to this time too probably, had 2 radar systems. The Air Route Traffic Control System, the ARTC, or sometimes ARTCC, traffic, they didn't put another C in there, I forget now what the other word stood for, Air Route Traffic Control Command or something like that. Anyhow, that was a long distance radar set they had going on. The people who manned the ARTC center sat in a little unlit room with no windows in it that was set apart from the tower at National Airport. It was a dim room, so the air traffic controllers could read the radar screens, which were glowed with a sort of a lavender kind of glow. The radar in the ARTC could be adjusted, and I haven't been able to find exactly what the range was. You see a number of estimates, but I believe they could adjust it to anywhere from 60 to 100 miles radius. Then you had a separate radar system which was in the tower, Washington National Tower. And that was a much shorter range radar, maybe 30 miles radius. So the diameter of the beam, when it swept the circle, would be 60 miles for traffic sort of at the final approach. And then Andrews had its own radar system. I don't know what the range on that one was, but they play a role in here. Theirs was probably a long-range one, and Bowling didn't have a radar system, or at least it was shut down for this particular night. So we have those three main venues. Now, normally there are fighter aircraft at Andrews Air Force Base to this very day. If they need to scramble something in the national capital area, they come out of Andrews. But at that particular time, the runways were being repaired at Andrews, so all the fighter aircraft were based at Newcastle Air Force Base in Dover, Delaware, a short distance away as airline travel goes, airplane travel goes. So again, that too plays a little bit of role, because once aircraft came down from Dover to Washington, they couldn't loiter, they couldn't hang around the area too long before they had to go back when they were running low on fuel. That's how the terminal looked back in '52. You can still see the core of that present terminal today. Okay, on duty this first night was the main gentleman I'm going to speak about there in the middle, a fellow named Harry Barnes. Harry Barnes was the chief air traffic controller. On July 19th, about 20 minutes to 12, Harry Barnes and his crew, there were 6 or 7 guys, not quite like it is today. Air travel has expanded a great deal. We're enjoying a rather quiet evening, when suddenly, literally out of nowhere, 8 targets appear on the screen. Again, it's the long-range radar. They were located about 15 miles away. They were located in the southwest and over Washington, D.C. Well, a fellow named Ed Nugent, who was probably one of these guys here talking with Harry. Again, Harry's in the center here. Nugent sees the 8 targets. He's immediately alarmed. They didn't have any word that there were any incoming aircraft, at least not 8 incoming aircraft. He calls in Harry Barnes, who'd stepped out of the room for a moment. They can't make head nor tails of it. The objects are moving in 3-mile increments. They would show up on the radar screen and vanish and be like 3 miles down the line, moving anywhere from 100 to 130 miles an hour when they could estimate the speeds. Now, getting more into the technicalities of radar here a little bit, these long-range radar sets, the sweep on the thing, it took 10 seconds for it to go around, so you could 6 sweeps in a minute. The National Control Center, the tower, the one that has the short-range radar, that radar made like 28 sweeps in a minute. So the increment, or the time between when an object in the sky would get painted by the radar beam, was much smaller with the short-range sets. So you could actually track an object more finely, if you will. When it takes 10 seconds for the beam to come back around again and paint an object, well, if that object moved 1,000 miles a second, it could go 1,000 miles away, and then it could come 1,000 miles back in 2 seconds. And by the time the radar beam got back to it, for all intents and purposes, the object wouldn't have moved.
Oops. I need to put a new battery in.
Battery.